How you doing? My name is Glenn. I am with V Power Equipment, and we are here today to discuss the new line of engines that we are now carrying at V Power Equipment. They are called Viking Power Equipment. At this point in time, we are carrying two of these engines. We are carrying the 223cc and we are carrying the 456cc. Let's start off by telling just a little bit about the history of this. Basically, a couple of years ago, V Power Equipment decided that we wanted to start carrying some of these engines, but there's a million companies out there offering the lowest price engine they can find. That wasn't the road we wanted to go. We actually wanted to try to build the best engine that we could possibly build. We've worked together with the factory, some engineers, but here at V Power Equipment, we've got 12 years experience on parts for these engines. We knew the weak points, and we wanted to make sure that we removed them weak points from these engines and try to put the best engine together that we could. So there's quite a few different features that I'm going to point out in these engines. Now, some of these features you will find on other engines, but to my knowledge, you're not going to find all the features on one engine other than the Viking engine. It just incorporates what we feel is the best of everything. So we'll start off by some of the obvious things. The biggest obvious thing is the 456 is a higher cc than you would normally find. Most of these engines are running around 420cc. So we've managed to get a little more displacement because no matter what you do, displacement does add power. And if you had the right options with that displacement, that's how you're going to get the most power out of an engine. And the same thing with the smaller one, it's a 223cc. Most of the engines you find in this class will be 196cc up to around 212cc. There are some companies doing some bigger ones, but most of them are in that, and we're at 223cc. So again, we've got more displacement than average. Also, both engines are Hemi head. So those of you that know about these engines know that Hemi heads just they have a little more robust. They produce a little more power. I will go into that in much more detail in a little while, exactly why the Hemi head does produce more power, but it does, and both these engines are Hemi head engines. Also, both engines come right from the factory with the electric start. The electric start's all installed, you don't have to install it. The only thing you would have to install is the key box. The key box comes wired to the engine, but you have to bolt it onto the engine. Which brings me, I'm going to show you just one thing here that helps you see how this key box works. Just as another thing, the detail we spent when we did these engines is the packing on these engines. A lot of engines today are shipped in cardboard boxes, which ours always comes in a cardboard box, like this here. But a lot of engines today come with just cardboard folded around them. Why do you care about that? Well, it tends to cause damage. A lot of these engines, you're getting them and they got slightly bent recoils, slightly bent mufflers, and while it doesn't make the engine useless, let's face it, we all would like to get our engine in perfect condition. So we did the best we could. Our engines come like this. This is one for the 223. It is totally encapsulated in molded styrofoam. So and then obviously a box over that. So we feel that this is the best protection for shipping, so that you should get your engine in perfect condition. I will also show you while I have it here. Basically, this is opened, so when you get the engine, it is in this styrofoam. The key box, while it's wired, is just set behind it. So you want to pull the top styrofoam off, then you'll just pull the key box out, the bolts are there, just bolt it onto the engine, and that is it. Your engine is good. You got to add oil, gasoline, and you are ready to go. Put this back away, and we'll bring this engine back up. Okay, so we've talked about the CCs. So let's talk about the Hemi cylinder head. It's a pretty important thing. I've got two cylinder heads here. Now these aren't off of this engine. These are just cylinder heads, just so I can try to explain what the exact differences between a Hemi head and a non-Hemi head cylinder head. So basically, this is a standard cylinder head. It does have a dip in here. The piston on this engine would also have a dip in the piston. Basically, the detonation takes place partially in the cylinder head and partially in the cylinder. And on a Hemi head, it's like this. it would have a flat-topped piston, and this whole thing is indented, so the detonation on a Hemi head happens solely in the cylinder head. The benefit of this is it makes for a hotter detonation. And while we want to keep the engines as cool as we can, we want the detonation to be as hot as we can, because a hot detonation burns off all the fuel, and by burning off all the fuel, you're getting all the power out of that fuel. Raw fuel that spit out the exhaust didn't produce any power, it didn't do any good at all, it just polluted the environment basically. So Hemi heads basically have a hotter detonation point, that's what gives them more power. Also, because they have more surface area in here, the valve size can be larger when it needs to be. I don't know exactly what the valve size is on these engines. That's something that the engineers did. So again, I don't know that fact, but I do know that Hemi heads do allow a larger valve to be put in there when needed. Also, another benefit of the Hemi head over the regular head, the rocker arms. So this is a standard head's rocker arms, and basically the push rod comes up and this thing pushes the valve down, and that's what opens the valve. These work relatively well. They've been used for a long time, but one of the drawbacks on them is, as you can see, they kind of walk around a little bit. So when the engine's running at full RPM, this rocker can actually move around a little bit. Now, it doesn't seem like much, but because of that, the valve opening can vary slightly. And obviously we want to try not to do that. We want to be as precise as we can. Where if you look at the Hemi head, it's more of an automotive style rocker arm, and basically it can't go side to side. It's running on a machine shaft, and it's going to be the same every time. So the valve opening will stay more consistent, and again, that adds a bit to our performance. So I'm also going to show you one other thing. Now I'm going to move this camera so you can see it, because while we know that the Hemi head is just a better system, there's no doubt in our mind about that. However, we did notice this is what most of the other engines that are using Hemi heads, they would use this type of a system. And one of the things we did find at V-Power Equipment was that these rockers here are a steel. They're pretty heavy duty stamped steel, and I've never seen one break, never. These here are like a cast aluminum, and while they're fairly reliable, I have seen them break. I have seen some of these rockers break off. So what we did was, on these engines, is we told them, well, we want the Hemi head design, but we want the steel stamped rocker. So basically, give me a second here. I am going to pull off the cylinder head, or the valve cover rather, on this engine, and I'm going to show you how we took care of that problem. I'm going to put this on hold. Okay, so now you can see our rockers are actually the steel stamped in there, and used like that. They're still riding on the machine shaft, so they still have that. There's no wobble in them or anything. They're in there, tight. But because they're that steel, as I told you before, I have never seen one of these steel rockers snap. So we feel that we have eliminated that problem. While it wasn't a major problem, it was enough that we knew about, and we want to make sure that you didn't have to deal with that. So we took care of that with this type of a rocker. So in the next part of this video, I'm going to have to position the camera so that you can see the engine more clearly. As a result of that, it basically cuts off my face. I apologize for that, but I'm sure you didn't come here to see my face. You came here to see the engine. So again, I'm going to reposition the camera. Thank you. That's our Hemi head. That's how we've got the most power out of them that we feel we can. Now let's talk about cooling, because as I said, we want the detonation to be as hot as we can get it to be, but we want to try to keep the engine as cool as we can keep it. So basically, there's been some changes here. They did a little bit of a redesign on the fan blade to push a little more air through the system. That helps keep it a little bit cooler. Also, if we look on the back side of the engine, and hopefully we can see that. I'm going to bring the camera in closer so we can try to see that. In here, we have a plate that comes in. This plate does a couple of things. It redirects the airflow to kind of run more right over the fins of the cylinder to try to help keep that cylinder cool. It also itself acts as a heat sink, so that it is taking off some of the heat and removing some of that heat from the cylinder. So we're trying to move as much of the heat off the cylinder to keep this engine running as cool as we possibly can. And that again is part of the what we're trying to accomplish. The other thing that we have done here, we're going to just roll this engine over, is on the bottom of it, underneath the oil pan, there is also vents in here in the lower section, and that allows some of that fan air to come out through the bottom of the engine. It also has some heat sinks on this to help remove some of that heat. The bigger engine's slightly different. It's got more straighter lines in it, but it still has the vents on the bottom. And again, that's to try to help keep the oil cool, because let's face it, if we can keep the oil cool, then we're going to help keep the whole engine cool. Also, by using a stamped steel valve cover. Now, some Hemis use these, but some Hemis use an aluminum, cast aluminum valve cover. The stamped steel valve cover helps dissipate the heat better, get rid of the heat better. It just allows that heat to escape better, so we went with a stamped steel cover. So using these several features, we've got the engine to run a bit cooler, which will basically extend its life. So I'm going to put this back over here now. And we're also going to talk next about the air filter in the system. We did not, let's see, here we go. We chose to use the canister style air filter on both engines. So basically, if you go underneath here, we've got a regular canister with an outer pre-filter. So it's a regular paper cartridge filter, and it is the same. Obviously the big one is a bigger filter. But it is the same idea. So instead of being just a foam pad as some engines use, we have a regular canister filter on this, and that will help keep the dirt out of it, and again, that will help extend the engine's life. So we also want to show you another feature that we did here. We had found on some of these engines that some of them were prone to some leakage. On this engine here, it was mainly in this bottom area. Most of these engines only have a bolt here and a bolt here. We added the one more bolt here to help shorten that span, so that there's less likelihood of there to be any oil weepage coming out of here. The span was, we felt, was too long, and that's why we were finding in some cases there would be some oil seepage coming out the bottom of them. This one here also was added in some more bolts. Honestly, I should have marked them, but I didn't. I think it's this one and this one was added, but most of these this has a few more bolts on the plate. And again, they're basically just trying to eliminate any chance of oil leak, make the back plate stronger, and just make it a better system. So that's on them plates. And we're going to open it back around. And okay, so also both engines come with low oil shutdown. So should you get low on oil, rather than run the engine will shut off and save your engine. We also have on both engines, both engines, they have a dual dipstick here and here, because depending on where you're mounting this engine, you may be able to get at one side and not get at the other. So that way there will allow you to get both of them. Also, this recoil is what I call clockable. You could turn this, so there's 3 bolts, they're exactly spaced apart. So you could take this off, move it this way, and you would have this pull start now coming out over in this direction. You could actually turn it and have it out coming out the bottom. I'm not sure why you'd want to do it, but you could do it if you needed to. So this thing is turnable. So this makes it easier for this engine to mount in different scenarios, because you've got the dual dipsticks, and you've got the turnable recoil. So the mounting plate on the bottom of these is very universal. Pretty much everybody's using the same plate today. So if you're replacing a newer type engine, it's probably going to be a direct bolt on. If you're replacing a very older engine, like an old Briggs and Stratton or something like that, they had different plates, but these plates were designed that in most cases they will directly replace them old engines. You may have to drill an extra hole or something, but in most cases you can. Now, this engine, just so you know, the bigger engine comes with a 1-inch output shaft, and the smaller engine comes with a 3/4 output shaft. They're both a key weight shaft. The key does come with it. It's in with the toolkit and whatnot that's packed in with the engine. So that's the shaft length on both of these engines. So what I believe we have done here is we've produced a superior quality engine. I believe it's probably one of the best engines on the market today. And as you can see, we incorporated all the best features we could find. And we hope you like it. And